Welcome back to the Lucky Orange Show. On today's episode, I'm chatting with Lucky Orange's own Molly Staats. As the Director of Strategic Partnerships here at Lucky Orange, Molly is the driving force behind our ever-growing ecosystem of partnerships and integrations. In this conversation, we discuss the differences between ecosystem-led, product-led, and sales-led growth, how to get buy-in from internal teams from technical to marketing to leadership and beyond, how to start building relationships with potential partners and integrations if you're starting from zero, and a whole lot more. Now, before we jump into the conversation, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. We have a lot of great conversations that we're going to share here coming soon. Can't wait to get them in front of you. So if you're ready, let's go talk to Molly. Let's start by telling the listener what an ecosystem is and how it helps a company like Lucky Orange achieve its business goals.
In really simplistic terms, what an ecosystem is, at least in my interpretation and how we're executing against it, it's really like one giant family tree for your business, right? So you have different branches. You may have your aunts and uncles that you see every once in a while and you spend holidays with, but then you have your more immediate family, like your brothers, your sisters, your parents, what have you, that you see more regularly. And honestly, that's like what an ecosystem is, right? It's the people you're closest with your business. They're the ones that are supporting you, helping you to grow and expand your business. They're the ones that are, the cheerleaders for you across different things. They want to see you successful. So I know that may be like a super simplistic way to put it, but it's really the best real world example I can think of and that I've really used to contextualize what an ecosystem is, sans all the complexities and things that go into it.
Right. So you see those companies that you're partnering with, whether it's through an integration or otherwise, and we'll get into the different types of relationships that you have. What kind of relationships exist, though, within an ecosystem that kind of make it beneficial for Lucky Orange?
Couple different ways to approach it. And when I got to Lucky Orange, they were very integration focused, right? So the extent of the partnership looked like, did we technically integrate with someone? And while that's definitely a part of it, one of the things we've been trying to do within the last couple of years is really be that co-marketing first organization. So how are you going to know if that integration is really going to yield you the results that you're looking for as far as customer acquisition or customer retention if you don't first try something that's a little less labor intensive, right? So we've really taken the approach at Lucky Orange to be that co-marketing first organization. And do things like webinars, do social exchanges, do ebooks or white papers, those sorts of things to say, hey, one, is it a good fit from our audiences? Are overlapping audiences engaged? Do we have a good value prop to tell between the two organizations? And candidly, are you easy to work with? I think one of the big things in partnerships that you can't write down and you can't write a playbook for is, do you like working with the other person? Are they easy to work with? Are they responsive? Do you just genuinely enjoy being around that person, virtually or in person? But I think that's something that really can separate people. And one of those things, even as you're hiring for partnership professionals, something I know talking to others that you can't put a finger on until you interact with that person. Are people going to like working with you and being around you? And you're the representation of your brand, not only to, the external world, but also that ecosystem network. Right. So it's important that when you're doing the webinars, when you're doing the ebooks, are you being responsive to those people? Are you easy to work with? Are you making their lives more difficult? Then it's probably not going to work very well for you.
Well, I won't ask the listener if they've been one of our partners in our ecosystem, if they enjoy working with you or not, but
I think we should throw up a poll on that.
Okay, great. If you have worked with us in the past,
okay.
do you like Molly as an ecosystem professional?
Comment below if you like working with me.
I think you hit on something important there, and the reason why you and I work a lot together is because an ecosystem, as we've approached it at Lucky Orange, is definitely co-marketing first for us to help us build relationships, start relationships. And on my side, from the content and brand side, it's been really, really helpful to have those experts to tag in to help our customers. We're experts at conversion rate optimization and a few other related topics, but if I go to try and talk about email marketing, my knowledge is much more limited. And so having you and our ecosystem to lean on has been really helpful from that front to have those conversations to pull in together. And I know you said, there's the integration partners and then there's the other partners. When these opportunities arise, what does the evaluation process look like when you're considering saying yes to a new partner? And maybe even without naming names, what gets to a no? What would lead to you saying, you know what, either in general, this isn't a good opportunity for us, or maybe even just right now, this isn't the time for us to partner?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really interesting and you and I have all obviously been on this journey together, but when we first started out, we were getting inundated with requests to say, hey, we want to do this with you. Hey, we want to do that with you. And as a partnership team of one, with the extension, obviously, of working with you from a brand and content standpoint, it's really hard to say where am I going to get the bang for my buck. So really where I spent a lot of time really on the onset is coming up with a partnership scorecard that said, here's what's most important to us, to Lucky Orange. Some of those things were, were they platform specific? So were they only on Shopify or were they only on BigCommerce? Did they have a big social reach, right? An organic social reach that they were going to be able to get to? Did they have high reviews on G2 or Capterra or, specific platforms like a HubSpot? So those are things as a baseline, kind of creating that framework to say, hey, if I would say, non-biased, is this a good person to work with? Do they have good opportunities available? Those are some of the things we, would evaluate against. It's also interesting because as you start to get a little bit of muscle memory there and say, okay, I can quickly look and evaluate and say, yeah, that person's a good fit for us, just based on doing it enough times, filling out the scorecard, kind of evaluating. It's also another thing to consider is what are you trying to achieve out of your partnerships? If more recently we've kind of transitioned to a brand awareness, we really want our partnerships to get us more brand awareness in the industry. If you have the resources and you have the processes in place, which we've been able to do over the last couple of years, even with a small team, you're able to just start saying yes to opportunities because you have a process in place that you know how to easily contribute to an ebook. You have enough topics and content that you've worked up, over your time that you can say yes to a webinar and you have good content to provide to that. So more recently, we've really been taking a yes to most things approach because the partners that we've been able to start attracting now are ones that are really aligned with our audience. As far as who you wouldn't want, I think there's some opportunities we've seen where the audience is very specific to a very specific region of the world. And they may say, hey, we want your stuff to be translated into a very specific language. And if it's not, that's not going to work for our audience. That's kind of a clear, hey, it'd be nice to work with you guys. There may be good overlap in every other area. But if this is going to be a barrier to conversion for either you or for our product, then it's probably not a good fit. And that's more of a not right now. I've also seen several of those, as products evolve, as technical roadmaps evolve, you're able to say yes in the future. So keeping those leads warm, even if it's a check-in every once in a while to say, hey, I haven't forgotten about you, but it's just not right now. So I would say the scorecard's a good starting point, but after a while, you'll just get conditioned to knowing the 4 things you're going to look at, and the more robust evaluation process isn't necessary.
We'll definitely get into at some point in this conversation what it looks like starting from zero, because we didn't start exactly from zero. We can talk a little bit about how your role has evolved into this, but it's been really interesting to watch this thing sort of compound on its own. We're working on booking guests for the Lucky Orange show now, and a lot of that is coming from, hey, we did a webinar with this company 6 months ago or 8 months ago. And once you establish that first contact and you're active in the ecosystem and they see you out there, they're much more likely to have a conversation with you. And of course, we're talking about we take on partnerships and co-marketing opportunities that benefit our audience, but we also want to inject our knowledge into other parts of other people's ecosystems. And one thing, you and I attended the Crossbeam conference last year, Supernode, and one of the interesting things that we noticed was every single ecosystem is different. Much like a snowflake. I hate to go there, but much like a snowflake, that everybody's is different, and it can be a competitive differentiator. Our ecosystem is unlike really any other out there, and that's just kind of the way it works. How do you go about in the evaluation of partnership opportunities, making sure that what we have to offer also kind of aligns with what their audience is? It really just topics based? Or is it in pursuit of, an advanced relationship beyond that initial co-marketing thing? Is there anything you think about when considering what we're providing in the other direction?
I think partnership fit, and you're keying in on something that's really important, is the ticket to success moving forward. And what I mean by that is specifically how your teams are organized internally, whether you're a product-led growth company, whether you're a sales-led growth company, even to the point of being an ecosystem-led growth company. You have to have really strong alignment on that specifically. And the reason is why is because a lot of partnerships we go down the path of, and we start to have the conversation, we do a co-marketing, and then the conversation really starts to shift to referrals. Hey, can you start sending me referrals my way? Can you start sending me referrals? Hey, I'll send you these referrals. Let's get set up on a payment structure so we can pay each other and track the referrals. If you are a sales-led company, that's great. That makes a lot of sense, right? Your sales team are looking to bring partners along to help close the deal, to make that their product more lucrative, fill in product gaps. If you tend more to the product led or ecosystem led, where you're really starting to see is less on the day-to-day hand-to-hand contact of those fostering those prospects or opportunities, and you're really relying on the product itself to speak for itself. And if you're not aligned with your organization and they're expecting these tons of referrals, that sort of thing, and that's just not something you can provide in the traditional format, the partnership itself is not going to be successful. And so we really tried to gravitate towards finding those relationships that we're really aligned. We're a product-led company, and eventually hoping to transition more and more reliant on the ecosystem-led growth. But I think it's important to kind of establish those boundaries up front and say, this is what we offer and bring to the table. How does that align with how you guys are currently structured? Because you can set yourself up for, disappointment or unrealistic expectations if you don't have those conversations from the onset.
Right. And being product-led growth with, the product driving all the interactions with the customer and kind of all the way through the experience is usually seen as a great option for smaller and even mid-sized companies because the product does a lot of the work. So it does feel like it's a natural evolution, though Lucky Orange has been around for a while and has seen really consistent growth and success. It does seem like a natural evolution in the past couple of years to pair it with some ecosystem tactics to come through and say, let's try and grow in these other ways. And also it feels like it requires less dependency on product-led growth, similar to how if you're looking at paid marketing channels, if all your eggs are in one basket with PPC, Google has an algorithm change, your SEO stuff falls off the map, whatever it is, you can diversify there and kind of really open up different lanes for acquisition and other ways to kind of drive demand for your product.
It's interesting too, because Andreessen Horowitz, the VC based out of Silicon Valley, they have been big on their valuations and very transparent, I think more so than other VCs, on how they value companies, how they get to the valuations. And one of the things they've consistently, over the last 2 years have said is companies that are specifically sales-led growth, that's all they're seeing, are companies that are more of a risk for them, because there's so many things that can happen with a sales-led company. You have to lay off people, you may not have a good batch of salespeople, all these different things. But those that have this partner influence revenue, partner source revenue, ecosystem-led growth, partnerships are a big part of who they are companies that are being valued higher. And Andreessen Horowitz are saying, yeah, we're going to take a risk on those companies that have that mix of both sales-led growth, product-led growth, ecosystem-led growth, because there's less inherent risk if you diversify where you're trying to grow, and you're not just reliant on the human sales team interactions for the company. So I think that's interesting that a big VC player with a lot of money is even valuing how important partnerships are to the overall approach.
Definitely. And internally, there's been an obvious recognition that it's an important pathway for us to explore. And you've done in my opinion, a great job of getting buy-in on the overall ideas behind the ecosystem and the benefits for our company. But you have to continue to get buy-in for that approach over time, with grabbing technical resources, taking up time on the co-marketing end with content. And I'm just curious kind of what your approach has been as you've explored the idea of ecosystem-led growth, how you've continued to get buy-in, and kind of gather those resources as you need them along the way.
I think what's interesting is being a co-marketing force organization, the concept of asking for technical resources or leadership buy-in on something that I may not have an initial dotted line to revenue has been interesting. But someone that, when I was first starting out in partnerships gave me this advice and I thought it was sage. They said, cherry pick a metric that you can easily achieve in the first couple months and start highlighting success against that metric. And I think that's really important. That's not to say you shouldn't be unrealistic or continue to say, I'm only going to cherry pick and highlight the good metrics, but go initially when you're trying to get that buy-in and go get that metric you can be successful in right off the bat and highlight that. And again, it's from a product standpoint, from a leadership team, they're always more leaning towards wanting to do the sexier, fun thing that's related to the product that's going to make a big splash. And the grind with partnerships is it's relationship based, so it takes time. It's not something that overnight, all of a sudden, you're going to become an ecosystem led growth company. No, you have to put in the work, and putting in the work looks like building those relationships. Okay, it's hard to put a number on those relationships. Okay, but over time, back to the family tree example, I can take a line and say, because I interacted with this person, I now have this relationship. We've had this opportunity. We've been able to see this level of growth. So I think, like I said, going back to cherry pick the original metrics and then don't overcomplicate it, right? Don't go into these leadership meetings with this huge slide deck with all these different metrics and all these different commitments. Be very straightforward with what you're trying to achieve and what business metrics you're going to impact. And don't overscope yourself. I also heard one time when I was starting out in this that the partnerships program should pay for itself in 18 months. Be careful saying that out loud to anyone in the room, but I think it's a reasonable thing to suggest that if you, depending on what your product size, your plans, how that works, I think it's reasonable to suggest that, starting day one, looking back 18 months, you could say, hey, I've at least been able to cover my salary and look what I've done in 18 months. Now I can go from there and continue to build on that.
Yeah. I mean, it's much like measuring brand awareness. It can be quite a challenge,
Yep.
whether you try and go after something like word of mouth coefficient, or you're just monitoring your non-paid signups, or whatever your metrics might be. There's a clear path with the more advanced relationships too, like you were talking about earlier with referrals. Can you talk a little bit about how you track? I know that you track partner influenced leads, and we talk. A lot of people out there will know about marketing qualified leads, sales qualified
Yep.
leads. But you've also brought to the surface the idea of an ecosystem lead. Can you talk a little bit about what that means, and at least to date, how you've been trying to use measurement there?
Yeah, so I think there's really two metrics from a partnership standpoint that I think are important to key in on, and both the co-marketing plays into this and the integration. Partner sourced revenue. So if you're going to build an integration, and Lucky Orange has integrations with, major platforms like Shopify, BigCommerce, and HubSpot, where we have an app listing in their app store and we can say someone signed up and then they upgraded to a Lucky Orange paid plan from there. That I would consider as partner sourced revenue. The partner, because we were on that, they came directly from that app listing and signed up for Lucky Orange. That's something we can directly source. The partner influence is a little trickier, right? Because there's different ways they can come in. We're able to track digital sources, so online, to say, hey, someone signed up from Lucky Orange because we can tell they visited a blog on, Optimizely page, for example. So that's one way to be able to do it too. Partner influence would also be leads you get from webinars or ebooks or download lead list sharing like that. It's important to track those because, again, going back to the metrics you're presenting to the leadership team to justify your role, it's important to say, hey, we may have gotten 1,200 leads from this engagement, but of those 1,200 leads, here's how they performed with us. And tracking against the long term, because a lot of those leads we've seen from a partner influence standpoint, they may not convert in the first month of your interaction with them, but 6 months later, they're coming back and saying, hey, I've heard of Lucky Orange on this webinar. Now's the cycle in my business in which I need a tool like Lucky Orange, but I heard about them first on this webinar. Okay, I remember that. I'm going to come back to them from that. And that's really powerful too, because we talk about top of funnel marketing initiatives. Partnerships really can fall into heavily influencing that top of funnel. So it's good to make sure you're tracking against those leads for, up to a year, candidly, just to make sure you get the full picture of the long end game of partnerships.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about, um, we talk a lot about how to measure these things, but really as a small team, part of our way to victory with some of this stuff is just by, like you said earlier, saying yes to more things and being able to be more agile with this stuff. We don't have, thankfully, we don't have anybody really coming at us hardcore to say, you have to convert this many leads per quarter through the ecosystem for it to be a success. We've been given a lot of freedom, both creatively with the relationships and the way that you spin this. And then in my end, how we execute on the co-marketing side of things. I'm curious. I think a lot of people listening to this may be at organizations that have a large partner team, but there's also some that are saying, you know what, we have been growing kind of like you're talking about steadily. We have seen some success in a variety of channels, but we would love to become less dependent on our marketing budget. We would love to become less dependent on channel XYZ. What are some of the things that people should consider when they're first taking on an ecosystem, first taking on partnerships as a concept, and what are some signs that they might be ready to head in that direction?
It's interesting too, because kind of going back to Andreessen Horowitz, and they've done a lot of research on partnerships and how they affect a company. It used to be, even 5 years ago, most companies wouldn't do a partnership hire until they were 50 plus, right? You wouldn't see anyone putting emphasis on it until they were 50 plus. Now, so many partnership professionals are being hired in the first 10 hires. And I think that's very interesting concept to think about too, because the industry as a whole is saying, yeah, we're making the shift to recognizing that partnerships matter and you can be successful, with the partnerships. I mean, I was the 13th employee hired at Lucky Orange, so not quite the top 10, but I think that's interesting to say, yeah, it's actually in practicality happening. Now, as far as how you start to see success, I would say nothing is too small to start, because it can be overwhelming to say, even if you're a big team, to say, oh my gosh, I don't have the resources to write an ebook, or I don't have the resources to host a webinar or even do a podcast. I mean, if you asked us a year ago if we'd be hosting a podcast, we probably would have said not in the scope. But nothing's too small, even if it's a simple social swap or a TikTok collab, or all you can do is provide a quote to their ebook. Start there. And I think that's where it's a snowball effect, right? You start saying yes to one thing and it was a little thing. Now you start to be able to scale and be structured in a way where you get better at things so you can take on those bigger projects. So I would say don't be afraid to start small and say, here's all I can offer, but I can offer you this. One of the things with partnerships is, if you're in the position which we were very lucky to say, people were coming to us with opportunities of inclusion. Not everyone may be in that position. So you have to go out to those partners and offer value off the bat. And again, it doesn't have to be this big blown out thing that can get them 1,800 leads, but saying, hey, we actually have a really strong TikTok audience. We'd love to promote your brand on there. Not asking you guys anything in return for this, but we'd love to promote you, to get you exposure to our audience. That's a great way to get your foot in the door. And even little things like that can make a big deal, because you're a good person. They like working with you and you're offering what you have at the time.
I think it would be amiss if we didn't quickly hit on Crossbeam. So Crossbeam, as a capability, you mentioned nothing is too small to get started, but if somebody wants to layer in a piece of technology to help them better evaluate partnerships once they get going, can you describe a little bit about how that works as a tool and how it's worked for us specifically at Lucky Orange?
Yeah, so we've been able to work with both Crossbeam and Reveal, which are similar products, but it's really that partnership matching, and to say, hey, we can load in who our prospects are, who our current customers are, and match those against, your current customers, your current prospects. So I think it's interesting to be able to use a tool like that to say, hey, where can we see the co-marketing opportunities exist? If we know we have a lot of mutual customers, does it start to make sense for us to build the case for an integration, right? So our customers could see more value from our products if there was an integration. There's a case to be made there. That's a big undertaking. And we know a lot of us may not have the development resources to do that off the bat, but a co-marketing opportunity, if you have similar prospects and you guys know that both of you guys have a very niche audience of a back to school audience, say, and both of your products or your technology support a back to school audience. it would make a lot of sense to take your list from your prospects and go at them together and say, here's how we can prepare you for back to school. That's an easy win to be able to say, yeah, let's go target them together, because the power of two potentially, and with a strong value prop between you guys, the power of two can be a lot better than the power of one. So yeah, tools like Crossbeam and Reveal give you, where it used to be a world where we're exchanging spreadsheets and then I have to dedupe and cross-reference, and then, oh, that list is outdated, your list is outdated, and you can never stay on top of it. Crossbeam and Reveal make that account matching for whatever you're using, customers, prospects, so much easier, so much more straightforward, and honestly up to date, because who likes to live in outdated spreadsheets?
It feels like ecosystems, much like many other things, and I think specifically about content marketing, is that there's a maturity curve. And so the
Sure.
first step, just in content marketing, the first step is to say, we want to start doing content. Okay, great. Now we want to do more content. And then you hit a point where you say, okay, we have the capacity and the workflows to start publishing stuff very regularly. Let's be smarter about it. Let's do more research about our
Yep.
topics, and let's lean on some SEO goals or wherever it might be. And then you get into personnel, and you get into all these more enhanced deliverables and things like that. And it seems like within the ecosystem approach, it's a similar idea where you say, look, let's just start talking to people. Let's get our word
Yep.
out there. It's almost brand awareness, but with a deeper relationship with people, and saying this can potentially lead to something that can be beneficial for both sides of the equation. Start with co-marketing. If there's an integration in the future, what does that look like? Or even if it's some sort of non API driven integration, if there's some other sort of technical implementation, great, that you can build into each other's funnels, or even an offer or something like that. And it kind of just gets more and more mature and more beneficial for the business that's taking on the effort.
I mean, it's interesting too that you say that, because I think this 80-20 rule applies in more ways than one across a lot of different topics. But they say 80% of your partner successes, and however you're defining that, whether it's partner sourced revenue, whether it's influence, whether it's building integrations, comes from 20% of your partners. What's interesting about that, though, is if 20% of your partners lead to 80% of your, success there, I'd rather have 20% of my partners be 10, 20, 30, the number be big, versus if I only have 10 partners, well, 20% of that is two partners I'm relying on. So continuing to build that ecosystem to get that 20% of highly effective partners, you have to work with a lot of different people to really start to see success with that. And you do that by, starting with one interaction, which leads to an introduction to the next partner. You also can't be afraid in partnerships to ask for that introduction. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a partner I already work with and say, hey, we don't work with X, Y, and Z, but I know you guys do. How do you feel about giving me the introduction? And if they like you, they like working with you, your relationship's been good, they're 9 times out of 10 going to make that introduction for you. So that's also something that I think is really important, because if you want that 20% of highly effective partners, to make that number just effective for your business, you got to have a lot of partners.
Yeah, I mean, the partnerships aren't going to strike themselves up. They're not going to manage themselves. I think a lot of the
No.
work that I see you doing is even just managing relationships with our platform partners like Shopify, HubSpot, those e-commerce platforms, because for us to maintain our apps there's a lot of work that has to happen. And there's certain characteristics, obviously, then of a good partnerships person. Looking forward into 2024, I know we've got a lot on our plate that we can't even necessarily share with the public yet, but I'm curious, what has you most excited kind of in your corner of things as you keep moving throughout the year?
Currently is something that I'm seeing the trend of, and kind of mentioned this earlier, is in the past 10 years, I think it's been the year of the SDR, right? The sales development, everyone's hot on sales, get in, new people doing new things. And I really think looking forward, and even starting to see this over the last year, it's the partnership managers and the partnership development reps, all of those people. It's really their time now to start making impacts in business. You're seeing partnerships professionals being elevated to the C-suite level, to SVP level. That's something that's never happened before. And I think that's exciting, because the more resources that get put into the partnership elements and arms of businesses, the more successful they can be. And it's impressive how successful most partnership professionals, I mean, not to, brag on us, but the small team being able to accomplish what we've been able to accomplish so far is impressive. And even with more executive leadership support, financial support, surrounding support of the ecosystem as a whole, I think it gives us big opportunities. And at the end of the day, we all just want more customers that pay us more, that stay around longer. If we can be successful and make the partnerships a vital part of that customer success, that's a win for everyone. So really, that's what gets me excited is partnerships having that seat at the table now. They've been able to show their impact, and now businesses and companies of all sizes, whether you have a 100-person partner marketing team or a 1-person partner marketing team, are really getting that seat at the table to drive business and make a better experience for the customers overall.
Right. Ultimately, it's better for the customer. They get a better experience, more cohesive experience for their needs. Well, you heard it here first. The golden era of partnerships is upon us. Thank you so much, Molly, for joining me today. Where can people find you online if they want to continue the conversation?
Check me out on LinkedIn. Obviously, we Staats at luckyorange.com. If you want to learn more, our Sean and team have done a great job with our website too, and dedicated partnership page. So I'd love to talk to you all and just connect, even if we don't think there's something that makes sense today. Never hurts to commiserate with other partnership managers about all the work we're trying to do and accomplish. So hit me up on LinkedIn or shoot me an email.
Awesome. Thank you, Molly. See you later today.
Bye, Sean.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Lucky Orange Show. Before you head out, make sure you hit the subscribe button, whether you're listening on Spotify, watching on YouTube, or finding us somewhere else. And while you're at it, check out the Lucky Orange social media channels for conversion rate optimization advice. Let's start the conversation to see how we might be able to help you with your business goals. Until the next episode, happy optimizing. Have a great day.